Okay, so, well, welcome everybody, and sorry for the delay, 7:12. We'll just open the meeting for 7:12, and here's our, we're gonna have an agenda. I think we'll first start with the committees that are having a posted meeting. If they would call their meeting to order and do a roll call vote of who's here, starting with the Housing Authority.
Okay, Rick Eichler from the Concord Housing Authority calling our meeting to order. I'll take roll call. Rick Eichler here. Edward Lerner. He raised his hands and voiced here. Stefan Bader.
Here.
Stephanie Schroback.
Here.
And Charles Phillips.
Here.
And
So-
Vincent Carl, is he not with you?
He's just observing.
Just observing, sorry, my mistake, okay. Okay, so the Concord Housing Development Corporation?
Hi, Lee Smith, Chair of CHDC, present, calling the meeting to order. I can't see all of you at the same time, but roll call vote, Lee Smith here. I see Peter Lowett.
Here.
I see Jim Burns.
Here.
I think I saw Yanni Tizitz. Yanni, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else from CHDC who I don't see?
Great,
All right, I'll take that as a no, but thank you.
and so for the Concord Foundation, do you want to just introduce your team who's here?
Sure. I'm Rich Feely, president. I know Holly Darzan is here, Terry Rothermel and Charles Phillips, both of whom are past presidents. And did I miss anybody else on the foundation board?
Steve Carr is here, yeah.
Stephen Carr as well. Okay, I think that's it.
And then the Affordable Housing Trust?
Hi, Keith Bergman, Chair, and I'm here also with member Mike Lawson, and we do not have a quorum, so we will not convene a meeting, but we will attend your posted meeting.
Great, great.
Thanks.
And we already had an introduction from the members of the planning board who are here, and we have a few members from the finance committee and the League of Women Voters, as well as interested citizens. So very good. So 31 people, I think I see on my participants. It's a great.
Liz, if I may
Yes.
interrupt, it's Burton Flint, Chair of the Planning Board. I joined late, and with me, I think we are a quorum. So if I could just take a roll call.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, it's so Kate McEnany?
Burton, I don't think you have a quorum. There's only
Oh, I
three
don't?
of you.
Oh, okay. Pardon me. Well,
No,
at
no
any
worries.
rate, I'm on the call. Thank you, Liz.
Sure. Great. So this is a great showing of interest, and we have a few things to talk about, and I think it's to hear from each of these groups about what's going on. The idea of the Concord Housing Roundtable is to get the interested parties together twice a year, kind of going into the town meeting preparations, and then right before town meeting in the spring is usually the way it works out. And there's always many things to talk about. So, and this particular session is no exception. We will try to keep this to a little over an hour, break by 8:30. And so we'll just move forward. So that's welcome and introductions, and we did the call meeting to order. So we just proceed now. There's no voting or that kind of business. So it's really a discussion group. And I think that we'll let each person or each group talk about what's going on in their areas, and then maybe have a few questions at the end of each person's time, and maybe then move on to the next and see how that goes. And we'll start with the Housing Authority. You're on mute.
Geithner, Concord Housing Authority. So updating the Commonwealth Avenue project, we have, the good news is we have a schematic design for the house. We have approval from Natural Resources with Order of conditions, we have approval from the ZBA for our planned residential, a special permit for our planned residential development and with its conditions. And so all we need now is to figure out how to build the house. We have available funds in the 400,000 range, 450,000 range. And we have a project budget closer to $700,000. So we are $240,000 short of our goal to build the house. And we came up with a plan to go for $100,000 worth of home funds, matched with $140,000 of Concord town set aside affordable housing money. We took that to the select board. The select board's feeling at this point is that $700,000 is a bit steep a project cost for, that's not the construction cost, that's the full project cost for the house. That's a bit steep for one affordable unit. So they did not go for the idea of giving us the $140,000 that we need. So we also couldn't go for the home funds money without that. So we are still $240,000 short, leaving us with a couple of options. We can continue to complete the architectural and engineering drawings to the point where we could bid the project in early 2022. We could then have a real price rather than an estimate for the project, at which point we could see what that number is. If it turns out to be also in the $200,000 range, then we could go to town meeting and ask the town for it directly with a town warrant article. But that would still be a $700,000 or close to it project cost for that, which many people would think maybe is too steep a price to pay for one unit. Balanced against the idea that when Giroux Park was, the land was purchased and the house torn down, that it was sort of a promise to replace that house that needs to be kept somehow. So one question for the housing groups is to maybe think about how they, not just the housing groups, but maybe anybody in Concord that's interested in affordable housing and follow the Giroux Park purchase and development phase, how they feel about the idea of either building this house for a lot of money or perhaps not building this house here and building it as a part of maybe a larger project somewhere where there might be more leveraged ability for the funds that could be devoted for less than $700,000. We might get more. So that's one question for everyone to think about, is how much do we really want to build this house given the past and the money situation. The other question might be, do we want to, and we actually have a meeting set up. Do we want to pursue this as a non-housing authority project? One of the things that makes it so costly is the public bidding process and prevailing wage restrictions on building this house with public funds through a public agency. And so there is this possibility, if we could figure out how to do it, of turning this into a private nonprofit project with someone interested. And the first group that comes to mind is Habitat. They're currently working on the project on Main Street and have some interest, we think, in doing another project in Concord. and we could discuss with them their interest further. And then we could try to figure out how to make that happen. I wasn't party to the process for when that lot was purchased and transferred to Habitat and how complicated that was. But my guess is we would have to go through a similar process to transfer that property to Habitat. Disposition of a public property is a process. So, but I'll bet it could be figured out if the interest was there. So that's the another option. And I guess I'm asking people to think about it and maybe comment on what their thoughts are. And that's that on Commonwealth Avenue. And that's probably the biggest question mark we have in mind right now.
Thank you. Did anyone want to ask a question? Like maybe Holly Darson wants to ask a question and Lee wants to ask a question?
Okay, Holly?
I was just curious if you had considered prefabrication and if that would save any of the money that's maybe goes into the public bidding process.
Right. So with the discussions with a local modular company in Littleton that works with a company in Maine, there was not much hope from that company that they could save a lot of money for us. They don't even really advertise that their modular buildings are more affordable. They only advertise it for time savings. So, I mean, yes, there might be a little bit of money saved from a public bidding, prevailing wage point of view for building the two boxes that the house could be, main body of the house could be made from, but the foundation, the front portion of the house and all the site work would still be under prevailing wage. So they really didn't offer much hope. And then I talked to the architect and not our estimator, but a whole nother estimator who was willing to comment and actually felt that there wasn't much hope for saving a lot of money going through that process of redesigning the project for that. So not a lot of hope in that direction, no.
Lee, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, sir. So CHDC was the purchaser of the house and the property on 930 Main Street. We bought it in an arm's length transaction from the prior homeowner, and then we entered into a development agreement and a sale agreement with Habitat, and that went overall fairly smoothly. If that's something that you'd like to consider looping CHDC into, I'd be happy to have an offline conversation just to get some more details, and we could discuss maybe what the different public disposition issues might be, and happy to bring it up at a future CHDC meeting if there might be a possibility.
Great, thank you.
Rich?
We also had some money in the purchase of 930 Main Street, and I feel very strongly we'd like to see this house built. We tried to save the one that was on the land, and everybody said it was you couldn't afford to move it. Well, I do find it hard to believe it would cost $700,000 when the land is free, but I understand the bidding issues. I would certainly like to see CHDC explore the idea of acquiring title from the town, which could be done inexpensively. The money was paid, after all, for the part. Not all we asked was that this one house be preserved. So I'd like to see CHDC pursue those.
Thank you. I'll just mention that the Housing Authority has title now. The town has conveyed it to the Housing Authority, so that's who owns the title. And one of the things just to talk through is the shared septic between the property that the Housing Authority owns and this new property. So, but those are just details to talk through.
Yeah, they would go together as a single project. So Habitat would again end up with two units as they are on Main Street. Yeah, the sewer it combines on site and then goes out to the street.
Yeah.
So it just takes some smart real estate and public procurement people to figure out how that process would take place without breaking any procurement and transfer of land, public money rules.
Yep. Okay, good conversation. I think just in keeping with the agenda, I think we'll just move right along to the CHDC, and thank you, Rick, for your update there. I know that the Housing Authority has other projects to work on, but I think that you've hit on the one that's of most interest to the group. So Lee?
All right, thank you. So an update on the Junction Village project. The developer is working with DEP to get permitting for their on-site septic system. It's a long and arduous process, but they're well on their way. And hopefully they'll get approval for that within the next few months. My understanding is that their financing is all in place. They're hoping to close probably late spring at this point, and then commence construction immediately thereafter. As far as the rest of the site goes, there's a task force that's up and running and doing a lot of really good work for the open space piece of that. There's design underway. There was a public forum recently, and there's also an application to the CPC for funding relative to at least the first phases of construction and some invasive plant removal. So we're looking forward to see that progress. The other big thing that CHDC is involved in right now is a potential purchase of property on Old Marlborough and Upland. It's a little less than 6-acre site that CHDC and other town stakeholders are looking at for a combination of open space preservation, including a conservation restriction and housing development that would presumably include hopefully a significant affordable component. The property is adjacent to the river and also the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. So there's also a CPC application in for that project with a request for funding for both community housing and open space preservation. And CPC's meeting tomorrow night at 7, if anybody's interested in that. And I think they're describing it as the Assabet River Bluff project. It's got a number of different monikers at the moment, so I'm not sure which one it'll settle out at, but if you see that on the agenda, that's it. So we're continuing to pursue that through, like I said, the various stakeholders, and keeping our fingers crossed and hoping we can move it forward.
Great, thank you. Any questions, comments? Really, is that a none? I'm just trying to look here. I think if you raise your hand, you pop right to the left, right? Is that how it works? Okay. All right. Well, pretty good. Okay. We'll move right into the Concord Housing Foundation.
Thank you, Liz. I think the thing we're interested in all these projects, obviously, but the one that perhaps we've been doing a bit more on our own is trying to follow through on the transfer fee, which was originally proposed by Charles Phillips 4 years ago now. And we have been working with a statewide coalition, or I have, not as an organization, but as an individual. We now have approximately 75 organizations supporting statewide enabling legislation for a transfer fee for affordable housing. We've had a hearing 2 weeks ago with the Joint Housing Committee. Nothing's been reported out yet. There was a lot of good testimony, some from tenants, some from mayors like Mayor Curtatone of Somerville, some from Lise Holdorf of our Barrett's Mill Farm, which is an affordable housing unit here in town. The real estate industry was absent, but except on the islands where there is substantial support for the transfer fee from the real estate industry, probably will oppose it. I would say the legislative issues are getting it reported out. And some thought that people would say, oh, there's 600 million in the pandemic recovery money for affordable housing. Well, as you just heard from the Housing Authority, at 700,000 a unit, that isn't going to go very far. And it certainly wouldn't come to a lot of towns like Concord. So we continue to advocate for that. I think there's some thought there might be a compromise with the HERO bill, which has a transfer fee for both affordable housing and environmental climate resilience. Towns continue to pass this. Arlington passed one. Chatham has passed it, and that adds to the towns that have passed it earlier. So all I can say is stay tuned, and we will try and notify all the town housing agencies when we think another letter or statement of support would be useful. Everybody's been very helpful, and so is the select board. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you just recap like what other towns have passed this, or municipalities?
Okay, Boston with a $2 million floor, Nantucket, which has, I think, a $2 million floor as well. Somerville, Arlington, Brookline, Boston, Concord, Provincetown, and I believe Truro at this point. It's under active consideration in a couple of towns in the western part of the state.
Thank you.
These are local ordinances.
Right.
The enabling legislation, in addition to all the home rules that are pending, the enabling legislation would, with certain limits, allow any town to do a transfer fee for affordable housing.
Great, thank you. I see Terry, you've raised your hand.
Yes, and I can't get my own picture in the screen. Sorry about that. I want to bring up one other issue. I've been in affordable housing for 30 years. And I originally got into it because Concord was talking about doing open space and doing housing, and only one was getting done. So that's been my cause. But I've seen a recent situation where I think we need to ask the same kind of questions. And that's the StarMed facility. We need to monitor that over the next 5 years, because that's when the window in which the land might be given to us. We have asked for a lot of money to make it a humanly safe. Those are other people's money, not ours. That's a high level of security. And the state did an initial study of it and came out with housing in a very good position in the ranking of uses. And then we had our own committee. And the result of that own committee, the recent one, was that this was not the place for housing. I want to make sure that our next committee, I know of at least one member that is pro-housing. I don't know any others at this point. That we watch this closely, because at this point, it looks like almost all of the land the town is considering to be best used for natural resources and open space purposes. That, I think, is not the kind of integrity that Concord should be showing. And we have a while to watch it. It's all been done very quietly through that past report recently. And studies were made of housing of natural resources opportunities, recreation opportunities, but none were funded for housing opportunities. So I think we need to look into making sure that housing is represented, as this project has included that priority for some time. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Marcia, do you want to say anything on that? Sorry.
I'm a little bit surprised because, as I recall, the scenarios that were put forward all included some form of housing component. They were mixed use. But housing was incorporated in the proposals, or at least the recommended uses for the site. So I'd have to go back to the report and tease out how that might have been misinterpreted, if that was the case. There were several surveys that were done, and there was strong sentiment that for both pro and con of locating solely housing in this location. But I believe that there were 3 separate scenarios, and at least 2 of the 3 included a residential component. And I'll have to confirm on that 3rd one.
Thank you.
As I recall it.
The report is on the town website. If anyone wants to check that out, it's the NMI Star MIT Reuse Planning Committee. So if you look under committees, that's where you'll find that. I'm just going to put it in the chat, but I think that this doesn't have a chat. I guess we don't do chats here. Whatever. Okay, thank you, Terry. Did you have anything else? I see your hand is still up. Nope, it's not up anymore. Very good. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you, Rick. Thank you for your good work there on the legislative front. And carry on, and wish you all the best success for everyone running for the town. So I think that now we'll move to the Affordable Housing Trust.
Thanks, Liz. Hello, everyone. Keith Bergman, Chair of the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, and joined tonight by fellow member Mike Lawson. Our other 2 members, we are a 5-member committee. We have 4 positions filled. Currently, the other 2, select board member Linda Escobedo and town manager Stephen Crane make up our contingent right now. So we've got 1 vacancy on the 5-member trust board, and I'm hopeful that we'll come up to full strength at some point. We're the new kid on the block, and we've just got started. In fact, we had a special meeting at 6 o'clock tonight to be able to vote to approve the trust document, which gets us started. So we're grateful to have that step taken. And the other thing that we've been dealing with And we sent out a briefing for fellow roundtable members in advance of tonight. We are looking at developing guidelines for the Affordable Housing Trust, that our bylaw that was passed at town meeting last year directs the trustees in part to develop policy goals and statements consistent with the town's adopted housing goals and subject to approval by the select board to serve as guidelines for the trust. So we're taking that language to mean that we're not going to be a rogue entity. And I should mention that in a previous life, I chaired the Affordable Housing Trust Study Committee that drafted this proposed bylaw language. And we were purposeful in doing that because we wanted to make it clear we're not a rogue agency, that we're not going to have our own sets of priorities, but rather what we're looking at is to be guided by the town's adopted housing goals and to specifically get approval by our appointing authority, the select board, on our policy goals and statements as guidelines for the trust. The fact that we are obliged to develop the policy goals and guidelines, we see as an opportunity to reach out to our fellow housing stakeholders in Concord, including all the organizations represented by at this housing roundtable and by the public at large, that we would like to embark on a process in the coming weeks. I'd say weeks, not months, to develop a set of guidelines with community input. And towards that end, I wanted to just
You can share your screen, Keith, if that's helpful to you.
yeah. Unfortunately, I can't because I'm on my iPhone, and my iPhone
okay.
is leaning up against my laptop because I'm in a very nice house, but it has no Wi-Fi except during the summer. Who knew? But the trust is. We would say that and we've told town meeting that the trust complements the town's existing affordable housing efforts and entities and programs. And this I add editorially, with sustained funding sources, we can act quickly when affordable housing opportunities arise. Because we don't have to wait for votes of town meeting if there's the funding there. We don't require a vote of town meeting on particular projects. We'd have the authority to approve them. And indeed, even with the further approval of the select board, the trust would even be authorized to acquire property. So there are certain advantages. We can be nimble and doesn't have to wait for an annual town meeting process of bringing a slate of funding forward to town meeting. However, and I certainly agree with Rich's recap of where we are on, state funding, home rule petitions, and all to fund affordable housing trusts. That the one in Concord would greatly benefit by the passage of those dedicated funding sources. Short of that, we're at this point, the housing trust has no money available to it. There are cumulatively, I think about around $500,000 left over from the 1.5 million appropriated the last 3 years. Those are in articles that the selectmen have at some point. Now that the trust documents are being filed, that there will be some balance that will be transferred to the trust, and that will be great. And at that point, we'll have money that we would be authorized to expend. But for the future, without a dedicated funding source, we may find ourselves in the position of working with the select board to to advocate additional funding from town meeting or from other sources. We have not begun to discuss that this year, but it's sort of a consequence of wanting to be nimble, wanting to be able to act quickly, but not having enough funds to be able to do that. So in approaching the issue of adopting goals, what we're envisioning is that and I want to thank Liz for giving us a template of the summary of the housing goals that have been adopted by the town, that they are contained in the 2018 Envision Concord housing plan element, in the 2015 housing production plan, and we're also referencing the 2021 Community Preservation Committee funding guidelines for housing projects. Those and what we want to do as an exercise is to go through those goals that have been adopted by town entities and determine which ones are appropriate for the trust to take up, and then which ones of those should be prioritized. How those goals would then be expressed? Would they be expressed in terms of, would we quantify what in a given year or a number of years, a number of housing units that we might want to bring on or support? We have not approached, but that is the sort of thing that it would be helpful to have input on. If there are regulatory tools and incentives that some other board needs to develop, we would be in a supportive role, but we wouldn't be the lead dog on those. So we would appreciate the opportunity to engage each and every one of the housing groups represented here and other housing stakeholders, whether that's some initial feedback tonight on which goals do you see as the highest priority for the trust to consider. Be glad to have your opinion on that, and also would be glad to engage with you after tonight whether through joint meetings or us sending a delegation to meet with your board or whatever. But we very much like to have a cooperative process. And of course, since we have our meetings are all public, that we would welcome the input of the community at large in this process. So, and I defer to Mike if he had any more to add. Looks like Mike's okay.
I'm
There
okay.
he
I
is.
have nothing more to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rich has his hand up.
Yeah, Keith, my question is, do you anticipate these being sort of decision rules when a project is presented to you, or do you see them as being programmatic? By that, I mean, could someone come to you and say, we'd really like to use this money, assuming we get the transfer fee, to buy 5 small houses a year, rehab them as necessary, and flip them with an income limitation as what is now being called accessible housing, workforce housing. Or we're going to give so much money to expand the number of units in CHA. Or do you see it largely as, here are the criteria we will use when we are presented with the project?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I'm not sure what the answer is to it. That I think that we certainly want to have guidelines, and I know I feel strongly about this. I would hate it if we ended up being the place where we decide based on first come, first serve. I think we need to have some kind of framework that looking at what sorts of projects do we want to fund, because these are the things that the town and our fellow agencies want us to do. I wouldn't predict what that might be, but I think it would be helpful guidelines to have, and how we expend at this point what would be the limited resources available to us.
Thank you, Keith. It sounds like that the different groups here will be hearing from you to have a more detailed discussion on your proposals and your goals and guidelines, right?
Very good. And one other thing that I wanted to mention is that we would envision that since the housing production plan will be updated at some point in the coming months, that we would envision that after that plan has been approved, that we would want to revisit whatever guidelines we come up with now, which are based on documents that go back as far as 2015, and to update and renew, refresh our guidelines based on any updated plan that the town does. So we sort of are already identifying a two-step process. We'll do something now to be in place to get started, but we would envision that in the coming months that we would go through the process again to be informed by the update of the housing production plan. So thanks very much.
Mm-hmm. Good. Since you introduced it, maybe it's Marcia, do you want to spend a moment on the housing production plan? Status and plan, just because Keith mentioned it. So just
I'm
really
happy
briefly.
to. Yeah,
Thank you.
nice segue, Keith. The housing production plan has been funded for this year. And we do have a consultant on board to help us with the community outreach, and the Regional Housing Services Office is gearing up to add staff so that they can assist with the needs assessment component. However, we've recently learned that the 2020 census, which serves as the denominator for establishing our subsidized housing inventory requirements, will not be available until late in 2022. And so Liz and I will be going to the select board, hopefully in early December, to bring them a draft steering committee charge and to discuss with them whether we get started on this housing production plan or wait until we have that number, because our 10% requirement will change with the 2020 census numbers. And so we haven't gotten started. We have our initial meeting with the consultant team, I think next week, and we'll flesh out the pros and cons of starting now versus waiting, and seeing if there's the schedule for the consultants would allow for a delay in getting started on all that. So stay tuned for more. We're learning as we go, but we do need to put together a charge for the steering committee and again, find people who will serve on such a committee for the housing production plan. And that will be coming.
Yeah, so the census data is quite delayed, as Marcia mentioned, which is, of course, with the subsidized housing inventory, but also just the needs assessment and the understanding of how incomes have changed and housing tenure and all of those other data points that go into the housing production plan to provide a baseline of information. The American Community Survey is a survey data that provides some of that information, but it's not nearly as comprehensive as the decennial, whatever, the every 10-year census. So it's a trade-off for having the community conversation without the census, and there's some strong desire to do that, but also then waiting for it to have the more comprehensive data with which to have that conversation. So, as Marcia says, stay tuned on that. Okay, great. Any more questions for Keith? That was a nice update. Thank you very much, and congratulations for being seated. And it's great.
Thanks so much, and thanks for all your help, Liz. You helped get us to where we are.
So I think now we'll turn to the planning board. I'm not sure who is going to present. And Burton maybe is presenting, and I think that you can share your screen if you'd like to do that. I don't know that everyone has the benefit of the materials that were available to me this afternoon, so I don't think anyone has them here.
Yeah, we could share the materials. Elizabeth, I don't know if you wanted, you could share those. What we wanted to talk about was a part of an overall proposal we're looking at for changing some of the zoning in the Thoreau business, or the Thoreau Depot business district. And so this is the area on Thoreau Street at the intersection with Sudbury Road, including the Crosby's lot and areas around there. Currently, and how this relates to affordable housing is that if it's zoned so that you can build combined commercial and residential developments there. And if you build a multifamily unit, then of greater than 4 units, there's a requirement that 20% be deeded affordable. There haven't been any units created under that, and we're looking at making some modifications to that. And this has been a process that's been going on for about 2 years through a series of public forums and with the input from the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission's planning consultant, who's provided their input on what would be a way to actually get affordable housing built under this provision of the zoning bylaw. And what I can tell you, we've seen in other areas, not as part of this, that the requirement when you go over 4 units to have 20%, it results in projects being limited to 4 units, or looking at units that are greater than 10 units. It's that area between 4 and 10 where it doesn't make economic sense for developers to build 20% affordable. And so with that experience and with the input from the consultant, we're looking at modifying that requirement. So if you're building a multifamily development with between 5 and 10 units of housing, that 10% of the dwelling units must be available as affordable housing. And as it says on the screen here, greater than 10 units, 20 must be affordable. So it's actually reducing the affordable requirement, but we think that this approach would result in more affordable units actually being built. Another element that we're looking at is providing incentives around other for other things that from the community and through the planning process have been identified as being very important. That there may be a reduction in the affordability requirement if they're providing these other types of benefits. Specifically for the Thoreau Depot business district, we're considering the idea of if a developer that is building a larger project, so this would really be limited to the lots where Crosby's and the CVS are currently located, with I believe it's over 20 units, if they set aside a certain number of parking spaces for commuter rail parking, that their affordability requirement could be reduced to 15%. And we've also been talking about various types of incentives we could create to have more sustainable development. So things like creating electric vehicle charging or using electric systems for heat and for cooking and the like, and whether there could be incentives attached to that. That might be a trade-off with the affordable housing requirement. This has been a 2-year process, but we're looking at putting this forward as a final proposal for town meeting in 2022, and we wanted to come to this meeting to provide to solicit people's input and thoughts on this. One final comment I would say, and just thinking about in the conversation of the trust, is the problem with going from 4 to 5 units and then having to create an affordable unit is it is a big step in terms of the cost to a developer doing that, and it doesn't scale going very well, and that maybe the real solution here is having payments in lieu of creation of a affordable unit into the trust, so that funding could be used, it could be aggregated for the purchase of affordable units. So that's everything the planning board has on affordable housing at the moment.
And is there a time frame that you would like comments back by, or you do have a public hearing scheduled, I think in December, for the December 14th meeting?
Yeah, Elizabeth, can you go through that schedule? Because it would be great to have those comments so that we could have a fully developed proposal by that time.
Yep. So the planning board is scheduling a public forum. It's not a public hearing for December 14th. It will be a hybrid meeting. The in-person portion will be at the hearing room at the townhouse. And then there'll be a virtual option as well. And so the board, there'll be a presentation on the Thoreau Depot business project. And then various polling questions to get feedback and input on different aspects of the project. One of them being affordable housing. There's actually, parking, building height. Along with this project of the zoning, they also developed draft design guidelines to help guide and facilitate how redevelopment might look and take place. So no parking along the street. Parking, goes behind a building so that there's a street presence and those types of things. So all of that information is on the planning board's goals and projects page. The public forum will start at 6:30 and go till 8:30. They usually limit them for 2 hours. And anything else, Burton?
I think you've got it. But it would be great if you to just emphasize to get any feedback people might have in advance of that meeting as we finalize this towards the end of the year.
But should the warrant for the annual town meeting for 2022 closes February 2nd. So the planning board will just at every meeting between now and February 2nd, the planning board will just keep moving forward in, looking at the bylaw, looking at different options and, working towards getting either, a final bylaw drafted to submit a warrant article or, that's the goal, whether the board moves forward or whether there's different issues and concerns that get raised at the public forum, then the board will at least have another month and a half to try and address things.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
I think Terry has a question or has his hand up.
Yes, sorry with not having a picture again. I would favor amending someplace like the Thoreau district to be required 10% as opposed to the 20, and not to mimic what the builders would always love to do, which is to buy out of their responsibility. And I think we should stick with our requirement that housing is as important in this district as anything else. And to throw it away at the first glance of difficulty, I don't think is correct.
Thank you, Jerry. And certainly that's something that is forefront of my mind is if you do a payment in lieu of building it, what does that mean in terms of where it does get built? And that's certainly a drawback to that. And I appreciate your feedback on the 10%. We weren't looking at going that low, except for the area, except for between 4 and 10. But that's very good to get your feedback.
Great. Right, we just heard from the Housing Authority just how expensive building housing can be, right? So that all plays in together. Okay, so I think if there's no more questions on that, thank you. And so everyone to provide your comments as requested. And I think we'll turn it over to Marcia now on the League of Women Voters parcel list.
Okay, I need to see if I can find, I thought I had it up already, but hold on.
Mhm. So this is, you might recall, I think it was the last housing roundtable. We went through, the League of Women Voters had come up with, after some analysis, a list of parcels that they wanted to see about investigating feasibility for developing housing. So here we are 6 months later, probably. And So there's been some discussions and some initial review, and so Marcia will summarize then.
All right. Well, I started with a list that Liz Russ provided to me, so I apologize if something got left off. I didn't have the original presentation from March of 2021. And I started with the Housing Authority properties. And so we have to, this memo will be posted somewhere. We haven't decided exactly where, probably on the planning departments or planning divisions page about affordable housing. And perhaps the regional housing services might post it as well. We'll do that tomorrow. First off was parcels on Bedford Street. There was an existing affordable housing development constructed in the 1980s on Bedford Street. There are, I believe, 6 units at that property plus one in the front. Further analysis is whether we could tie into town sewer, and in that case, if we could, that there may be a possibility of additional development over the existing septic system location. So could potentially replace or renovate the existing Oaks 8 units and a potential for 4 to 8 additional units. On Strawberry Hill Road, which is adjacent to Finnegan Way, there are 6 units of affordable housing, and depending on whether the Housing Authority wanted to consider additional units or not, perhaps in the front, the septic system is behind the units, and there may be a potential for another 2 or 4 that might be done. It would depend entirely on whether the existing septic system could accommodate additional bedrooms or not. For Walden Street, 267 to 279, there are 3 structures, 2 units in each structure. And this is adjacent to land that was recently acquired by the town, the Emerson property. And there is a cart path on the northerly side of the property that might provide access to the rear portion of this land, where the Housing Authority could consider the possibility of an additional unit an additional building with 2 units of housing, using access or using a through access to that cart path. The floodplain and wetlands have recently been revised in this location, so the floodplain is not as extensive as it once was. FEMA periodically updates the flood information, so the blue line that you see is the actual 100-year floodplain elevation for the Floodplain Conservancy District. And there were 3 other properties that were identified on the League of Women Voters list. These are all currently single-family homes, and they either have a single-family house or a 2-family house, but they seem to be very much developed at this point in time with very little additional development potential. So I think it's down the road that if we wanted greater density on these properties, that the Housing Authority may want to re-examine them. Then there were the town-owned properties that were listed. First was 1232 Old Marlborough Road, the Peabody school site. It's currently in use as of the middle school and probably will be for the next 3 to 5 years. It's unknown at this time whether there are other town uses that may take precedence over the use of this site as affordable housing. There is existing bedrock on the site. It required construction of an off-site septic system, which is actually, can you see my cursor? This is the site on Powder Mill Road. This is Peabody, and the septic system is all the way over here on Powder Mill Road. So there may be some issues with the amount of septage that might be directed to that location, depending on the housing. The other concern that I've heard is that this is a site that is remote from the village centers and the services that are available there, including transit and transportation. Then there is the 735 Main Street property, which is currently shared or co-owned by the town and the Concord Municipal Light Plant. And it's currently in use by CMLP as a storage facility. Additionally, the town's facilities department, a relatively new department, is using the building for storage of supplies and equipment. So the town is considering other uses for the property, but have not made any decisions at this time. The site is located on town sewer, and there is a small piece of excess land that could provide an affordable housing location, but not a significant amount of additional affordable housing. Another site was the 120 Miriam Road, which is currently the Ripley Building, and Concord Public Schools and the Concord Carlisle Regional School District have their administrative offices there. And it's a 17.76 acre site, but it already has playing fields over a great percentage of the property and parking in this location. But it's adjacent to two other parcels that were of interest. The Amendalia land, this is parcel 4209, about 12 acres. This is currently in farming and community gardens. It does have high groundwater, which is a challenge for this area, with a very, very small access to Ridgeway Road through a very narrow passage in this location. So access is an issue, as well as on-site septic systems would be a question in this area, or whether there be capacity for the town sewer system. The other parcel that might be of interest was what we call the Burke Land. This was formerly owned by the Burkes, and it is currently in farming use, but it was acquired for school purposes through the sale of the Strawberry Hill Road site where Finnegan Way was constructed. That development was 19 units developed as a PRD. 5 of those 19 units are affordable and the other 14 are at market rate. So in all 3 of these, the Concord Public Schools and Concord Carlisle Regional School District would have to declare them surplus before they could be considered for additional housing purposes. And then there are parcels owned by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that were identified. 2 of them. One is 91B Main Street, and the town is in conversation, although it takes forever, it seems. It's 1.45 acres. This conversation started when Habitat for Humanity was beginning negotiations for the property at 930 Main Street. The person at the state level says that an appraisal must be done, but he needs to identify the person who will do the appraisal and must be done prior to any sale. And then because of the initial acquisition process for state highway purposes and the federal resources that were used, full market value is requested. Then opposite that, well, opposite of that property at 1733 Concord Turnpike is a 1.32 acre parcel that is a sort of a U-shaped parcel. It surrounds land owned by the Concord Oil, and Concord Oil continues to use the site in the middle of the property here. So there's some questions about whether there is contamination of the surrounding area or not, but the access would be through MacArthur Road and not, I think, forgive me, it's not MacArthur, it's I believe Emerson Road, and not from the Route 2A or Route 2. And then finally, there were some parcels that just had notes that there would be local opposition, and I felt it was important to explain why there would be opposition to developing these. This 1.12 acre parcel on Strawberry Hill Road is adjacent to the Housing Authority, and it's very, very steeply narrow sided. It was identified for potential realignment of Strawberry Hill Road. And I think the Public Works Department would be very concerned about losing that if there were ever an opportunity to make Strawberry Hill Road a little safer for bicyclists and for pedestrians in this location. The other site that was identified is 41A Barrett's Mill Road. This is currently in farming use, but this is an important site because of its history. And it is the parcel immediately adjacent to the Colonel Barrett House, the destination of the British regulars on April 19th, 1775, and it's been continuously farmed since that time. It is now incorporated in the defined area for the Minuteman National Park. So I think there would be a lot of historic interests that would not support affordable housing at this particular location. And then finally, parcel 3000 at 78 Old Picard Road, adjacent to the Peabody School is Cushing Field. It's a playing field and currently actively used. So again, there is ledge in this area, which would make installation of an on-site septic system very challenging, and may need to look at off-site solutions. But depending on the need for playing fields, I don't think that this is as likely an affordable housing site. So that's sort of the assessment of the list that was requested from the Concord Housing Foundation, I believe.
Yeah, I think it was the League of Women Voters and who primarily asked, and also the Housing Foundation wanted an update as well. So thank you so much, Marcia, for including all of your background and information in that. I think it helps to group the properties into areas of attention. Rich?
Frank, you're muted.
Rich Feely, you're muted and we can't really see you as well. Yep, there you are. And then now you're muted. Nope, you're still muted.
Okay, quickly, thank you, Marcia. And the board of the Housing Foundation came to similar thoughts on most of these sites. But this just shows how hard it's going to be. But there is land here that I think has the potential. It just is going to require a lot of trade-off between interests, which is why we had suggested to the select board that they appoint a committee to try and prioritize. Because some things are going to happen. The new middle school is going to get built. Something's going to happen to Peabody. I note that the daycare center is moving out of Ripley. And while some of these sites are probably non-starters for environmental or other reasons, I think it would be useful to get the interests together and see if we can find some of these that could take some affordable units. Because I think the lesson is that it's going to be harder and harder to acquire any land that is not currently in the ownership of the town or its agencies. So I just want to say, I think this is a great first step, but I think we need to have a committee that does some serious conceptual arm wrestling and create some priorities for this.
Well, I think that would be the function of the housing plan production plan as a first step. Once you have a steering committee, this list would certainly be incorporated into that document and serve as identifying certain parcels that may have priority over others as they become available. So that has how we have identified properties in the past, and great opportunity to do it again.
Okay, well, then maybe some of us need to put in a green card and see if we can join the committee.
Great, thank you. Okay, so thank you everybody for getting through that agenda. A lot of things going on, a lot of interesting projects and ideas and initiatives across the board. So we just have a few minutes left if anyone wants to offer any comments or input. Stefan, I see a real hand versus a Zoom hand.
I just, thank you, Liz. I just saw something and I don't have the reference in front of me now, but it suggested that there was a count of housing units, if nothing else, in 2020 of 7,295 compared to 2010 of 6,947. So my quick math says that's an increase of about 350 units in the last 10 years. My sense is that 10% of that would be 35 units. Does this shed any light on how close we are or are not to a time period, however brief, when we'd be under the 10% threshold and a quick-footed developer might sneak something in? Or are we pretty much in good shape, given that there's only been an increase of 350 units?
So I can offer a few thoughts on that. One, that number is the total housing units as initially reported by the census, and it's not the same definition as what DHCD uses for the denominator. So they take that number and they subtract out the vacant seasonal units, of which Concord had 95 back in 2010. So that's a little too technical, I know. Additionally, this number is short by 200 plus units compared to the building permit data that we've been tracking for some number of years. So and we're not able to get this number down to the census tract or to any kind of detail to make sure that it really encompasses all the units in Concord. So that's just an open question that I have in terms of, but so we just don't know. We just don't know. But it is less than we had projected by some amount, and would appear that Concord would be, stay higher on the 10% than we had originally thought, if that number is true to form. So, and as Marcia said, the SHI and the recalibration all comes with the census data, which has no firm date, but the latest that we just heard from DHCD was late 2022. So we fully expect that Junction Village will have pulled its building permit by then, and will have added those to the numerator, eliminating any concern on this issue, is what our expectations are. Of course, reality may be different than that, but that's what our expectation is.
Thank you. And I just wanted to give a shout out and introduce Jennifer Lito, the Concord Housing Authority's new executive director. If she wanted to say hi. I know she wasn't part of anybody's quorum, but since she's here, I thought I'd say hi.
Thank you, and I'm sorry to not introduce you, Jennifer. Yes, hi. Why don't you say hi?
No, that's okay. Thank you. It's nice to sit in on this and see so many names that I've seen come across my desk. So thank you for hosting this. This has been really a learning process. So thank you.
Hi, Kate.
Hi, the housing production plan, Marcia, can you just give the bottom line on the timing of that? If you wait until the 2022 to get the new census, or to get the census data that's released, when would the housing production plan be available? What's the bottom line on when the housing production plan is going to be available?
What we have to talk to the select board first to find out how they want to proceed. We were anticipating, if we had started in November, which is what we had hoped, the contract was going to be asked for completion by the end of June. So that's 8 months. So depending on when we start, it will be about 8 months after that.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, I don't see any other comments, questions. I suppose we have to adjourn by group with roll call out. Is that, do we need to do it that way? I think probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would ask someone to raise their hand. I'll recognize them to make a motion to adjourn the Housing Authority. Stefan, did you raise your hand? Yep.
I did. I did, and I move to adjourn the Concord Housing Authority meeting.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Ed. And all those in favor, Rick Eifler, aye. Charles Phillips. He says he raises his hand, aye. Stefan Bader,
Aye.
Edward Lerner,
Aye.
Stephanie Strobeck,
Aye.
unanimous. Thank you.
Great. Lee,
Peter, if you're there, can we get a similar motion to adjourn our meeting, please? Jim?
Jim,
I've moved that we shut down.
All right. Motion to adjourn CHDC, roll call vote. Jim?
Yes.
Lee, yes. Peter, if you can hear us. Yanni? I'll declare us adjourned.
Yeah,
Lack
he's
of
done.
attendance.
Thank you.
okay, I think that might be it, right? I don't think we need to, I don't think we have to do separate adjourning for any of the groups left. Okay, thank you, everybody.